Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Sometimes the best way to find a living is to stay right where you are and study with UAS online. Career-specific distance programs from the University of Alaska Southeast are the fastest way to increase your earning power.
We connect all over the world.
The National Weather Service.
Good Monday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, and you can do that easily by going to weather.gov/Alaska or arh.noaa.gov. If you're checking out that chart today, you would be able to see a number of communities under winter storm watches, high wind warnings, and many other areas associated with some heavy rain. And you can also easily jump to the National Weather Service Alaska Aviation Weather Unit, as well as check in on the latest earthquakes from our Tsunami Warning Center, something many of you probably did within the last 24 to 48 hours or so. Numerous aftershocks across South Central, none of them producing any tsunami danger at this point. Let's take a look at what's going on across Southeast first, because that's really where most of the big active weather is across the Eastern Gulf tonight. We've got high winds, we've got plenty of rainfall across the southern and sections on the outer coast. We have snow in the north and across areas closer to Hyder and the Misty Fjords. So a whole lot going on just in this one section of Alaska. So big snow and strong winds starting tonight. For the Klondike and Haines Highway region, from tonight into tomorrow morning, we're expecting 9 to as much as 18 inches of snow. Both areas for Haines and Skagway and up the highways are under winter storm warnings again. For the Haines region, 9 to 14 inches. For the Klondike Highway area, mainly above 2,000 feet, 12 to 18 inches of snow. For the Haines region, that could descend as low as 600 feet. So you're talking about a pretty good opportunity for snow in that region. On top of that, just south through the Lynn Canal, some decent amount of wind, 40 to 55 mile-an-hour gusts that'll continue into Tuesday morning. For the outer coast and the southern inner channels, starting tonight and through tomorrow morning, in fact, we're looking for sustained winds of 30 to 45 mile-an-hour winds with frequent gusts of 60 to 70. That's all along the outer coast and again in the southern parts of Southeast. For the northern and central inner channels, late tonight through Monday morning, winds probably won't be as strong, but you are going to notice the gusts of 40 to 55 miles per hour. On top of that, there's plenty of rain moving through southern parts of Southeast, and let's not forget about Hyder again. Localized heavy snow there. It could be on the order of 8 to 14 inches around the Misty Fjords region and Hyder as low pressure works up the eastern coast of the Gulf of Alaska by Tuesday morning. On top of that, we have storm force wind warnings across the southern sections of Southeast, and we're talking about the winds switching around. So if you see the wind forecast during the daytime tomorrow, as we're talking about the marine weather a little bit later on, keep in mind those winds are going to be switching around as low pressure works up the outer coast there. So here's a look at tonight's hazardous weather. We've got winter storm warnings in the north for snow for Hyder in the southeast region, but also for Haines and Skagway up north for the outer coast, high wind warnings all the way down into southern parts of Southeast. Now, it is going to be windy in other places. Just south of Delta Junction, we have a wind advisory that'll continue through tonight and into tomorrow. For this region, we could see gusts upwards of 55 miles per hour. That'll mainly go into about 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. So look for gradual improvement as we go through tomorrow. Up north, it's a blizzard warning for areas in the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. That includes Kaktovik. You're not only talking about snow, but you're talking about poor visibility. And for that region, gusts are probably going to reach around 45 to maybe 50 miles per hour or so. That is going to keep visibility down as it picks up and blows snow, probably below a quarter of a mile. So look for that to continue as we go in through tonight and tomorrow. And then across the Bering Sea coast and the Chukchi Sea coast just to the south, St. Lawrence Island included in that. A blizzard warning is in effect for you. Gusts there upwards of 55 miles per hour. And 2 to 6 inches of snow, and that'll go through most of the day on Tuesday. So tomorrow, not a great plan to go out, and you look for conditions to continue to worsen as we go through tonight and continue to be poor as we go through the daytime tomorrow. Again, blizzard warning means sustained winds over 35 miles per hour, visibility below a quarter mile, and falling snow. And all of those things create very poor and dangerous travel conditions. So if you do have to go out, make sure you have a plan, make sure someone knows where you're going, and make sure you take it really carefully as you go, because it's very easy to get lost in conditions like that. So blizzard warnings for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast and the western tip of the Seward Peninsula and St. Lawrence Island, including Gamble there and Savunga as we go through tonight and into tomorrow. Here's a big weather picture. Low pressure in its form really hasn't changed very much. We keep getting waves moving up from the North Pacific and into the Gulf. Some of those are tracking a little bit further west, as you see, moving over the Alaska Peninsula. In fact, just ahead of this today, if you saw some flashes, if you're out at sea or perhaps you're watching from shore, you thought you saw some lightning, maybe heard some thunder. You probably did. There were some lightning strikes out here south of the Alaska Peninsula earlier today. The big weather story, though, as far as the active weather for southeast, is the low pressure system tracking up the eastern Gulf. And you can see that spiraling up right here. A surge of moisture working through southern parts of southeast today brought an awful lot of rain. Some of that slowly working up toward Juneau with more of a steadier rainfall today. But all of this is going to add to the potential for heavy snow across Haines and Skagway and for Hyder right now through the rest of the evening hours. Looking northward, you can see the clouds are certainly working north, but along the interior, most of what we're seeing is more clouds than anything falling from the sky. Not a whole lot of rain and snow with that, but it certainly is cranking up the wind across the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And on the back side of this, we're dragging in a lot of cold air working across St. Lawrence Island. With that, we're getting the stronger winds and blizzard conditions for the western tip of the Seward Peninsula and St. Lawrence Island. Everything we see out across the west is really hit and miss showers. Northerlies coming into the Aleutians and into the Bering Sea coast along the Alaska Peninsula. That's creating some unsettled weather there and kind of low clouds and periods of precipitation. But what we're seeing across the southwestern coast is all being driven by this area of low pressure here. One more time for the satellite loop where you are, you can see the overall flow really has not changed over the last several weeks, nor do we expect it to change through the rest of this week. So again, what you see is kind of what you get today. Low pressure across the Alaska Peninsula has been down to 955 millibars. There's our showers and thunderstorms we saw today, areas of light rain across the Gulf Coast for most places, and rainfall spreading up through southeast today in advance of a 985 millibar low. Several waves of low pressure working around the outside of this overall circulation. You can see those rotating from east to west. As we get into tonight, low pressure will start working its way northward, a 979 millibar low there. That's bringing more rain and more snow to most of southeast tonight, along with some high winds again, with high wind warnings and winter storm warnings in effect for many areas. Hyder again looking at the potential for as much as 14 inches of snow, with Haines and Skagway also looking at some high accumulation totals, as much as 14 inches in Haines, and Skagway could be looking at as much as 18 inches there. Both of those again dependent on where you are with elevation. For most of south central, we're expecting most precipitation to be right along the Gulf Coast there. So for Prince William Sound all the way down from Seward to Homer, things could be rainy and snowy at times, but once you get up into Cook Inlet, things dry out pretty quickly. Snow showers are possible for some of the surrounding higher terrain. Rain and snow possible for southwestern Alaska, and then we get into much stronger winds for the northern and western coast, the Chukchi Sea coast, and blowing snow conditions again for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. By Tuesday, not a whole lot's changed for southeast. The pressure gradient should slowly ease up as we go through the day, but it's going to take a lot of the day for a lot of those big gusts to start slowing down. So plan on an unsettled day in southeast for sure. Look for periods of rain and snow showers across parts of south central. We're still looking at a tight pressure gradient, but notice a little bit further south into the Gulf, a 948 millibar low there, starting to really change things up out across the central Gulf. And as we get into Wednesday, that's going to dramatically affect the seas across the eastern Gulf. Some of those seas could reach as high as 25, 26, 27 feet along the outer coast. So keep an eye on that if you've got plans to transit the Gulf or if you've got plans to move anywhere along the outer coast. Conditions are going to be changing as we get into the rest of the week. Out across the west, look for periods of poor visibility, and across the north for sure with the tight pressure gradient, but that really extends out across the west as well. Look how tight these isobars are packed. Wind's going to be moving pretty well across the Bering Strait and over the ice. Not only will it be snowing for St. Lawrence Island, but it's going to be blowing, and blizzard conditions there are expected to continue. A 969 millibar low south and west of Nunivak Island. That's going to keep the flow going in from the north for the central and western chain, and periods of rain and snow for the Alaska Peninsula. Here's Wednesday. 953 millibar low in the Gulf, and once again the same thing's happening. It's just kind of spreading out as it does. The front's right up against the southeastern sections of the state, south central, southwest. The front's going to die off. It'll be replaced by more waves of low pressure tracking around it, but the damage is done. More wind for southeast, more periods of rain and snow for the Gulf Coast. Not a whole lot of that probably making it into south central along the highway system, but north of that, more clouds and probably some more wind for the Alaska range. And then out west, more wind and more snow for St. Lawrence Island, for the western tip of the Seward Peninsula and Nome, for the Chukchi Seacoast, and more blowing snow for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. And low pressure still sitting just south of the Pribilofs at 973 millibars, keeping moisture pumped in, but really not having enough to write home about there. So that's a look into the midweek from the weather crystal ball. Temperatures today generally in the 30s and 40s. You can see the warm air moving northward across southern parts of southeast, and you saw temperatures that were a little bit on the milder side for south central today. The interior also looking at colder weather, but with warmer air moving in from the south, we'll continue to see temperatures warming up just a little bit into the interior. Cold and windy for a good part of the Arctic coast, for the western tip of the Seward Peninsula, and south and west mainly single digits and teens there. But good news, the sun is starting to come up now as we're moving into that part of the year. So welcome springtime in short order. Well, maybe not quite just yet. For southwestern Alaska, look for temps in the teens, 20s, and 30s. For the Alaska Peninsula, generally in the mid-30s today, and low to mid-30s for the central and western chain. Here's a look at tonight, and you'll notice most areas are warming up across south central and southwest thanks to that predominant southerly flow. For southeast, 30s and 40s as well. Look at Ketchikan and Craig. Those temperatures there, even into Metlakatla. Temps there in the mid-40s, in fact, thanks to that very warm flow coming into southeast. Around Fort Yukon, 1 above, 3 below in Barrow, and for Nome, expect 18 degrees. Macoriac near 24, St. Lawrence Island 2 and 29 there in St. Paul as we head into overnight lows. High temperatures tomorrow, lower to mid-30s. It's going to be pretty mild for south central thanks to that warmer flow. In Prince William Sound, mid-30s there, 40 in Kodiak. Looks for mid to upper 40s for parts of southeast. So that warmth, the wind, all goes together there, but that will add up into snow for Haines and Skagway. 5 above in Barrow, 26 in Nome, looking for upper 20s. For Fairbanks, 33 in St. Paul, Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, upper 30s for you. Shemya, expect 32. Flying weather now, MVFR conditions for the Beaufort Seacoast, and most of the Chukchi Seacoast will just kind of flirt with poor visibility from time to time, but blowing snow could certainly make that worse for periods of time tomorrow. IFR conditions by the afternoon from St. Matthew to Nunivak Island, generally north of the Pribilofs and also along the western Alaska Range passes, as well as for areas from Whittier all the way down towards Seward and Resurrection Bay along the Gulf Coast there. For southeast, look for gradually improving conditions with MVFR by the afternoon, but many areas will likely see IFR to start. Let's check your pass conditions quickly. Anaktuvik Pass and Adigan Pass, we expect to see VFR conditions throughout your Tuesday. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, due to snow, expect IFR conditions through a good part of the day. Rainy Pass expected to see IFR throughout most of the afternoon. Windy Pass, we expect to see visual flight rule through most of your Tuesday. Same goes for Isabel Pass. It's looking pretty good. Mentasta Pass, we expect to see visual flight rule through most of your day. Tanita Pass so far looking okay visibility-wise. And Portage Pass probably leaning over to IFR as the day goes on as that storm system in the front get closer to the sound. And for Chilkoot and White Pass, obviously with snow in place, we're going to call IFR. There might be some improvements during the afternoon, so keep an eye on that. Freezing levels, looking at 2,000 to 4,000 foot levels rising across southeast starting tomorrow, and then pockets of warmer air trying to work their way into the interior. They're going to have a lot of trouble hanging on to that kind of warmth. The surface freezing line is doing a little bit better job heading northward there. But also, that's not going to go a whole lot further. Sea surface temperatures are also fairly close to zero right at that point. Icing potential above 4,000 to 6,000 feet in most places, a little bit higher as you get down across southern parts of southeast. That could be as high as 10,000 in fact. Most of what you'll see will be some isolated moderate. We did have a few reports across south central and southeast today, I believe, of rime, some of that reaching the moderate level. So there's moisture and lift out there and enough cold air to make it count. So be extra careful as you're flying tomorrow. The jet stream shows the track really hasn't changed very much. The super highway of weather coming off of eastern Asia, reaching speeds of 120 to 135 knots, and then running into a ridge across Alaska, which means we get the southerly flow coming up into the continental areas. And for southeast, you are getting a lot of that moisture on right on the chin there, anywhere from 80 to about 85 knots. With the jet stream right overhead. That is certainly helping to enhance and exacerbate the weather conditions you have. For most of the region, we are in the southerly flow of the low pressure system at 9,000 feet. You can see that south and southeasterly wind coming in from as little as 20 knots to about 55 to 60 knots out over the open Gulf. For the interior, you're looking at winds from 15 to as strong as 35 knots, more of a northwesterly flow right now for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. And for most of the central and western chain, you're in on the northerlies as low pressure is parked just west of Nunivak Island and north of St. Paul. For 3,000 feet, you can see a southeasterly flow cutting across more of the Gulf and coming in to most of the Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and reaching over Bristol Bay with winds from 40 to about 55 knots. Much stronger winds west of Haida Gwaii at 70 knots along the outer coast. A little slower flow inside the inner channels, but still a stronger southeast wind for you. Northerlies continue out across the Bering at 30 to 40 knots, and wind speeds across the interior still holding around 14 to as high as 40 knots. We expect some isolated severe tomorrow across central and southern parts of southeast with the stronger wind gusts. That should be no surprise. Low-level wind shear will be a main issue. Below 3,000 feet, watch for that and be extra careful out there. For the Beaufort Seacoast, look for occasional moderate as well as areas through the Bering Strait into St. Lawrence Island. Again, blizzard conditions are expected there, so probably won't need the turbulence map tomorrow, right? For southwestern Alaska and Kodiak Island, expect occasional moderate into Bristol Bay. Most of that will be below 4,000 feet. And watch for chop and gusty winds through the passes there across the Alaska Range below 8,000 feet. Occasional moderate should be expected. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with your sea ice update as well as your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Good evening, I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of Alaska Public Media and the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, welcome to Hangar Flying. This evening I'd like to do something a little different and very special. Last summer, the Safety Foundation was notified that a couple, Bob and Margaret Eskridge, who had spent many years in Alaska and made many contributions to Alaskan aviation, had passed away. In their will, they left a substantial sum for the Safety Foundation. And as you've heard me say many times before, the foundation operates on membership dues, donations, and those of you who use Pick, Click, and Give. Our board of directors is unpaid, whereas our office expenses are minimal. Our 3 scholarships and the facility expenses for our seminars consume our annual income. So when we received this very generous gift, which cover a year's expenses, we were speechless. After receiving this very thoughtful gift, I thought it would be appropriate, the board thought it would be appropriate, to recognize the donors who many of you would have known from their time in Alaska. Margaret Eskridge was born on September 14, 1929 in British Columbia. She married Bob Eskridge in 1955 in Mount Vernon, Washington, while Bob was assigned to Naval Air Station Whidbey Island as an aviation electronics technician. Bob left the Navy in 1957 and served honorably after serving honorably for 12 years. Margaret and Bob remained on South Whidbey for 2 years while he engaged in wooden boat building enterprise, until it became apparent that he just couldn't compete with plastic boats. What's important is Bob and Margaret relocated to Anchorage in '59, where Bob was hired by the Federal Aviation Administration as an electronic tech, maintaining FAA radio installations throughout Alaska. And although he was listed officially as a radar tech or electronic tech, he got into flying and earned his commercial instrument, CFI, and ATP certifications while serving as an FAA pilot, flying maintenance crews, staff, and visiting dignitaries to remote FAA locations throughout Alaska for a number of years. During his years of flying in Alaska, he met many pilots who had been involved in the early days of aviation, and he accumulated a pretty decent library of books. Margaret, meantime, ran a retail paint store before being hired by Carr's Food Center. She was later promoted to the manager of Pillbox Drug Store. She was involved with a local rifle team, which she in fact accompanied to an international competition in England. Bob retired from the FAA in 1982, and they returned to Washington, settling near Matts Bay. Bob and Margaret became involved in the local Bremerton aviation community, where Bob was a chief pilot of Kitsap Aviation Squadron Flying Club, and both participated in the Bremerton Pilots Association and their annual Blackberry Festival. Margaret became a naturalized citizen in 1993. Bob died at the age of 86 in 2014. Margaret moved to a retirement center, and her health quickly declined, and she passed away at the age of 85 on May 27th of 2015. She's interred at Tahoma National Cemetery in Kent. I've never had the pleasure of knowing Bob and Margaret, but their thoughtfulness and generosity to the Safety Foundation should not be forgotten. Tom Wardley and Ginny Hyatt started the Safety Foundation many years ago. The purpose and vision was clear: to enhance aviation safety in Alaska. Many people have dedicated their time, effort, and money to the mission of the foundation. To carry on that mission, we want to continue with the services and products that we provide. Hangar flying, this program, airs twice a week. We produce a quarterly newsletter for our members. We plan, organize, and present 2 safety seminars a year. We provide up to 3 $1,500 scholarships for worthy aviation students. We'd like to expand what we do right now. We'd like to put together a speakers bureau so you can go and get someone to come to your club or organization or meeting and talk about aviation safety. We'd also like to expand to other villages and towns in Alaska and present safety seminars there. But we need your help. We need your money, because all of this takes money. Please continue your membership. If you have not renewed for 2016, please do that. Go to www.aasfonline.org. And if any of you would be interested in making a bequest like the Bob and Margaret, please call me personally or anybody on the board, and we would be more than happy to help you out. We need your help. So Bob and Margaret, thank you. And for all of the audience out there, until next time, fly safe.
Thanks, Harry. We'll see you again on Friday. Here's a look at today's sea ice edge. Ice is expanding south and west, anywhere pretty much south and west of St. Lawrence Island. Hasn't quite reached St. Matthew Island, but we have detected some ices growing along the coast of St. Matthew today. For Bristol Bay, though, conditions probably won't change a whole lot because low pressure's here and kind of chewing up and changing the flow right here. But overall, the ice edge is expanding south and west. You can check this out anytime at weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. Remember the wind in southeast? Here we go. Look for strong and gusty winds, especially along the outer coast tomorrow. Winds from 45 to 55 knots along the outer coast, and seas up to 26 feet across areas outside of Cross Sound and south of Sitka. Look for areas in the inner channels to see winds as strong as 30 to 40 knots, with seas ranging from 7 to 10 feet for Tuesday. As we get into Wednesday, though, conditions are slow to improve. Look for 15-knot winds from the south or the north and east across the Lynn Canal, 30 to 40 knots across some of the southern inner channels there, and across the outer coast, you're still dealing with winds at 40 to 45 and seas from 25 to 26 feet as you get into Wednesday again. So you're going to see even higher seas just offshore. So watch for that and be wary, mariners. Here's a look at South Central for Tuesday, 15 to 20 knots in Cook Inlet. And look for easterlies inside of Prince William Sound. Not too bad there with a 3-foot sea. For the western Gulf, 22 as high as 30-knot winds from the south and the east, with seas from about 14 to 15 feet. Southeasterlies at 20 inside of Shelikof Strait become easterlies at 30 for Wednesday. And the winds pick up across the northern Gulf here. We're going to see a lot of seas ranging from 24 to 26 feet outside of Prince William Sound, inside up to 7 feet with a 30-knot wind, and northerlies coming down Cook Inlet over the sea ice and the ice-free waters, 8-foot seas, northeasterlies south of Calgon Island at 12-foot seas there, and northeasterlies west of the Barrens up to 45 knots with 13-foot seas. So all of that wind in southeast is working around the system and into coastal areas of South Central for Wednesday. The southwest, not too bad. Southeasterlies inside of Bristol Bay with an 8-foot sea, 25-knot winds there. Easterlies south of Castle Cape to Chignik, and southerlies a little bit further down the coast with a 10-foot sea on the Pacific side. Those become northwesterlies as we head into Wednesday. Northerlies north of Cold Bay and across the Bering Sea coast, and in Bristol Bay, northeasterlies 35 with a 7-foot sea for Wednesday. For the Aleutians, things are pretty quiet, it looks like. Northwesterlies for most of the central and eastern chain, 25 to 30, and as high as 13 to 14-foot seas from Nikolsky to Adak. Northerlies from Kiska to Attu at 25 knots with a 9 to 10-foot sea there. Those pick up a little bit more from the north and west on Wednesday with a 17-foot sea out west. More of a westerly flow. The central and eastern chain, 20 to 30 knots continue there in most areas. For the west coast, northerlies zipping across St. Lawrence Island and St. Matthew Island. Freezing spray south of the ice edge, of course. Northeasterlies across the west coast at 20 to 30 knots with 4 to 5-foot seas. 7-foot seas around the Pribilofs on the northerly wind. That diminishes and becomes a little more variable on Wednesday with a 6-foot sea, but northeasterlies should continue for St. Lawrence Island to the Kuskokwim Bay, 20 knots there north of Nunivak Island, with 3-foot seas closer to the coast and 13-foot seas closer to St. Matthew Island on that 25-knot wind. Look for blizzard conditions tonight and into tomorrow for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. An easterly flow at 30 to 35 knots over the ice and 25 to 35 west of Point Barrow. Northerlies from Cape Lisburne southward into regions outside of Kotzebue Sound, 15 to 20 knots there. Becoming northeasterly at 15 to 25 as you head into Wednesday. Otherwise, easterlies continue across the north coast, about 25 to 35 knots top speed there for Wednesday. Recapping tonight's weather, winter storm warnings, high wind warnings continue for parts of southeast. Rain and snow is expected. Look for a winter storm warning around Hyder with as much as 14 inches of snow. That'll wind up later tonight. For Haines and Skagway, though, the snow fun is just getting started. You may see anywhere from 14 inches around Haines to as much as 18 inches around Skagway, including the highway system, so be extra careful there. Looks like blizzard conditions will continue for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast as well as St. Lawrence Island as we head into Tuesday, so watch yourself there, and gusty winds south of Delta Junction through tomorrow. That's your Alaska weather. We'll see you again tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.